Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Marcus Cauchi. Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Adi.
It's great to have you on the podcast. You and I recorded a podcast. Actually, I was a guest on your podcast, and that was a lot of fun. You asked a lot of very good questions, and it was a great, lively conversation. And I'm going to add that episode to our show notes to make sure that our listeners get to listen to that as well. Because that was a great episode, and thank you for that. So now let me introduce you, and we're going to have a continuation of that conversation, but in terms of more emphasis on processes and systems and the importance of it, and obviously highlight what you do and your area of expertise. So Marcus, you have 35 years of scar tissue as a seller, manager, leader, recruiter, and founder. You help go-to-market leaders, founders, and PE stop waste and pipeline fiction. We're going to talk about pipeline fiction.
Absolutely.
And remove systematic dysfunction and get the job done effectively. You architect permanent behavioral transformation through intelligently lazy design and by putting the customer at the heart of everything that you do.
Absolutely.
That is quite an introduction here. So tell me, the listeners, how do you help entrepreneurs?
Well, entrepreneurs are often people who create elegant solutions to problems that don't exist. And so they go out and they create a product and then go looking for customers. I like to look at things differently. I look at the world through the eyes of the customer. They never buy a product or a service outright. They rent it. And they rent it because their current solution is no longer fit for purpose. And by looking at it through that lens, we save an inordinate amount of time, effort, waste, money, resource in trying to go and look for needles in haystacks. I much prefer the customer to bring me the needle. And so the whole idea of intelligently lazy design evolved out of a fabulous book by a chap called Greg McKeown called Essentialism, which is how do you do less but better on purpose over time and mean it? And I was mentored by a chap called Bob Mester. Bob is an engineer. He was mentored himself, an apprentice to W. Edwards Deming, to Taiichi Ono, who created the Toyota Way. And he also was apprenticed to Clay Christensen, who's the father of Jobs to Be Done. And
you were really apprenticed by people that were apprenticed by the the visionaries or the executors of systems and processes and process improvement and making things more efficient.
Absolutely. And then couple that with another couple of my mentors, a chap called Charlie Green, who wrote The Trusted Advisor and the best book on sales called Trust-Based Selling that has ever been written. And Mark Goulston, who sadly died at the tail end of COVID. And he wrote a brilliant book called Just Listen and another one called Real Empathy. And that got me thinking, how do we create safety for the buyer? Well, it starts by creating safety for the seller and by having systems and processes that focus our attention on the right end of the problem. And so looking at most organizations, they suffer from systemic dysfunction. that creates hidden friction, misaligned teams, bad decisions, and they don't protect their enterprise value because they're trying to scale, but they're looking at the wrong end of the problem. And so, one of the most important areas of the work that we do, and I think is fundamental to sales, management, and leadership, is empowering other people to make good decisions well. People come to salespeople because they have a problem and they want to make that problem go away. They want to create a better future. But by and large, what salespeople do is they try and open the wound, pour salt on it, and drive the pain. Well, in my experience, the buyers know their pain. They don't need to be reminded of it that much. And what they're really looking for is, well, how do I create the better future that is outside of my reach, outside of my grasp? And decision making is fundamental at every level, because if I can create the systems that empower people lower down the value chain or the chain of command to who are closest to the problem, either its cause or having to live with it, and they make the decisions and they empower their customers and their reports to make the decisions, then you end up with a virtuous circle, because everybody is aligned around the same outcome, but they have different role functions to execute.
What is your methodology for go-to-market?
Well, we call it the ally method because I believe that our job is to be our customer's ally, not their accomplice and not their adversary. So an accomplice, I'm slightly on the portly side. And if my wife and kids buy cake and cream and chocolate and all that sort of stuff, they become my accomplice, and send me to an early grave. If I find that I'm up against someone who's trying to constantly do me down, tell me I'm wrong, and we saw this with the Challenger sale. When they first did their research, they found that 50% of top performers had a Challenger style to their selling. A few years later, another study was done, and what they found was exactly the same thing, that 50% of top performers compared with the middle performers had a Challenger style to their selling. But they also found 50% of the bottom performers had a Challenger style to their selling. So how you show up, your intent, your motive, your triggers, the things that you do in terms of planning, preparation, your communication style, affect how effective that is. So I know people who use pain discovery in the most amazingly nurturing way, and it doesn't feel like someone's trying to drive a drawing pin into your flesh.
Right, and that's the thing, is you have to come up genuine, true, empathetic, caring, and not just trying to use the pain that somebody's feeling in order to get them to buy something, just like not necessarily using to take advantage of it.
Well, and you've touched on the really important part here. It's about motive, cause, and intent. If my motive is to make the sale instead of empower you to make the best decision for yourself, your brain will perceive me as a threat. If the cause of my pressure on you is my boss ragging on me and telling me that I better bring it home or not come back to the office, then I'm not in the right place. I'm not there to serve you as the customer. I'm there to serve myself, serve my boss, and keep my job. And if my intent is to convince you to give me your money, that isn't trying to serve your best interests. That is a byproduct in our world. It's a symptom of doing the right things well consistently.
Right. Now, Marcus, you touched on a very important point, which is preparation. When you are going to sell as a salesperson, what do you recommend? What should be the process to prepare for the sale?
Well, very interesting, because I've only today spent about 5 hours coaching people on exactly this stuff, individuals. The first thing I want to know is, what's your business model? How do you make money? Who do you sell to? What are your strategic priorities? And I can find that from the news. I can find that in the UK from Companies House. I can find that from your website, from analyst reports. I want to understand your wins and losses. I want to understand the market and the context in which you operate, the competitive landscape. your financial health, when your financial year is, your budgeting cycle. And I would strongly recommend that people do a lot of this grunt work in advance so that you're not doing primary research when you're in front of decision makers and people with budgets. Go and speak lower down the organization, go to the public domain sources and gather that information so you can develop a really strong hypothesis. So, for example, I was coaching someone today and they have an amazing data set. They're a data intelligence company in the public sector. And to my mind, one of the best uses of this is for private equity to be able to identify future investments and look at spend data and the call-off data from public sector contracts to work out which of these companies are selling into the markets that are adjacent to where we already are and will allow us to expand into those markets at very low cost and create alpha in the business by creating additional unexpected value. Now, that is a really interesting proposition. So we were just working on one company that's privately owned. They backed out of being a PLC. They've just, from Companies House, we've identified, done a big share buyback. All of the shareholders are the members of one family. And it just struck me, this is a godsend for this company to go and pitch to them and say, well, we can give you insight into exactly who you should be doing due diligence on, and then make them an offer on the basis of their actual revenues and where there is growth potential, because these guys have got a phenomenal history in the intelligence services and the MOD. So it's just an absolute dream, but you've got to be really precise. And where most people use generic stuff, we use precision.
Right. So what are some other areas to get to precision?
Well, I'm a big fan of Bob Mester's model of using the four forces. So what's the push, the catalyst that exists within their environment to change? What's the pull towards the better future? What's the magnetic appeal of doing nothing towards inertia? And what are the anxieties and fears of change? If I can map those to the problem owner, the process owner, the risk avoider, the sponsor, the outcome owner, and then identify the invisible influencers, I've pretty much got all that I need to be able to engage in conversations that will differentiate me or my client from anyone else they're speaking to who are going to be pitching product.
Good. So how do you elicit that information? How do you get all that information? Is that in a conversation with the subject matter experts? Is that a conversation? Is that doing some kind of an intel before, studying, researching? How do you do that?
A vast amount of it is advanced research, pre-call. So understanding the business model, the stuff that I've talked about already, the organizational structure, the buying process. You can come up with a hypothesis on the basis of their organization, their size, their sector, how other people do it. I can look for alternatives, so who their current incumbents are, outcomes, boundaries, pricing, all of that stuff. I can do quite a bit of research beforehand. But then when I'm in the conversation, I'm going to build on that. So I'm going to throw baited hooks out to see which bits of it they bite on. So I'm a fan of using a triple. So Adi, tell me something. Are you guys focused on the public sector because A or B or something else? So it's a bit like a Chinese menu. If you go to a Chinese takeaway...
And that's when you are actually in front of them and asking them.
Yeah, but I'm using the knowledge that I've gathered and the research that I've gathered.
Right.
Go up. I'm going to do my primary research away from them. And I'll do it lower down in the organization. So I'll speak to their BD team, their bid team, their ops team. I'll speak to procurement.
Let's talk. We're throwing on a lot of abbreviations that we probably understand, but so the business development team, the operations team.
Yeah. So I'll speak to people who are at the sharp end of the stick and are either the creators of the problem or the people who suffer the problem, because I want to know what is going on at grassroots level. And when they touch...
Marcus, how would you get to those people?
LinkedIn. I would look on their websites. I would look at testimonials. I would look on the public domain information. So, directors of companies in the UK, for example, are listed in Companies House. It's not the same everywhere, but that gives me their home address. So I can write to them if I want to. I can show up on their doorstep if I'm being a stalker.
Yeah, but we're talking about the lower level. So do you ask permission? Do you just call somebody at the lower? Like, how do you actually do your research?
I'll engage through LinkedIn. I will also use content to attract them. When I write content, I'm writing for one individual or one company and one person within that individual. It tends to catch lots of other people because my ideal customer profile, their personas, where they are in their funding cycle, where they are in their job cycle, there are many people like that. So I'll use LinkedIn content. I will contact them via LinkedIn through InMail. I will ask, Adi, I know that you know Avner. Could you introduce me? And here is the reason why. And I'll give you, a short couple of paragraphs for you to pass on. I will ask for referrals. I'm a big fan of cold calling once and everything else is warm or hot. So one of the things that I've developed is sell hot, not cold. And so we can go from zero to ramp in 120 days. And you might have to make half a dozen cold calls. But after that, everything else is warm and referred. Now, when you work on the basis of referrals, instead of a 1 in 23 win rate, you have a 1 in 6 win rate without training. But the average order value is 2.5 times higher. The average repeat business is 3 times higher, and the average referral rate is 4 times higher than cold. So I'm always looking at the multipliers.
Right. Right. So that is even before you actually talk to the decision maker.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm into, like you gave me the introduction of intelligently lazy by design. That is deliberate. I don't want to spend my time beating my head against the wall and then blame the wall for my headache. If I can go warm or hot and I can get hand delivered to the decision maker, it makes a hell of a lot more sense than me trying to break my way through their gatekeepers and all of the barriers that they put up. If someone who already knows them and trusts them, so I liken it to attacking a castle. I much prefer to be invited in rather than have to try and get over the moat, over the drawbridge, through the portcullis, through the killing ground where they're trying to pour hot oil and fire arrows at me, and then climb up the wall in order to break their window to enter into their world. It's much better if someone just invites me in for dinner.
That's exactly right. So, okay, so it's the preparation, it's the getting to know your prospect, getting to know what's important for them. And that goes back to the care. I mean, this is very caring because you're not just going there to make another sale, you're really going there to solve their problem.
Well, you've touched on something critical. The job of selling is service, not servitude. And there is a big difference. And if I remember my history correctly, the word "salas" comes from High German and it means to serve. And service is empowering other people to make the right decision for themselves. It's helping them to solve their problem in a way and at a time of their choosing, as opposed to trying to convince them. My job is never to convince. My job is to create the conditions so you convince yourself.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Makes total sense. So, we talk about go-to-market leaders that you service, not servitude, but you serve. And tell me more about your viewpoint of a go-to-market. What does go-to-market mean to you?
Right. Go-to-market is an organism. It is not a bunch of silos. So I'm working with one organization at the moment, and they have product, they have marketing, they have SDRs, they have AEs. So sales development reps, they telephone and make lots of cold calls. They have account executives who are the direct salespeople. Then they have account managers and they have operations. Well, in most technology companies and most scale-ups, those are all in silos. And every time they go from one to the other, the customer has to repeat themselves over and over again. I look at it differently. I see it as a living organism. And our job is to create the connections between the components. From the customer's point of view, you are one company. You know, when someone is hearing from us, they are hearing from principled selling, and they don't care which department or division it is. What they don't want is to be interrupted by something that is poorly timed, irrelevant, and low value. Our job, I see it as, is do our research so every touch is timely, relevant, and valuable, delivers insight with every question, empowers them to see not only what is possible, but possible for them. So it's not only within their reach, but also within their grasp. So it becomes possible for them. That's liberating, because what was impossible now becomes possible. And if I have them do the presentation, if I have them handle their own objections, if I have them close themselves, what I've learned over the years is people never argue with their own data. So what I love to also do is create a build your own statement of work process, so that from the moment we first touch, we are effectively co-creating the proposal, and it has the customer's voice, their vision, their fingerprints all over it. So by the time we get to the end, there is no debate over the price. There's no debate about the content, because you have created it all.
So how do you go about creating that proposal?
Well, it comes from asking better questions.
So you basically, what you do is you ask the questions, then they answer, then the proposal is basically based on the questions that you asked and the answers. So it is always in their voice, basically.
Pretty much. But again, this is where the planning and preparation comes in. So I do not believe that you have any right to interrupt somebody because you've got a list of 1,000 names and you're going to dial your way through them, because every interruption costs that person 7 minutes to get their concentration back, plus the time taken to deal with the interruption. Well, I remember when I had Chief Revenue Officer on my job title, I was getting 500 interruptions a day on LinkedIn. My email became a swamp, and I was getting phone calls all the time. So I just shut down. Well, I believe that we need to be able to whisper through the noise and create the conditions so that when we deliver our message, it is irresistible and it delivers incontrovertible value for that person, because we've done the heavy lifting, we've done the thinking, and we make it timely, relevant, and valuable for that human being. Now, by doing that, you automatically differentiate, because your questions are what differentiate you, not the information that you give. Anyone can vomit up product information, and when you do, you pretty much sound like everybody else. But if you've done your research and your questions hit home, there's nothing I love more than 7 or 8 times in a row within 10 minutes of first engaging with someone, them saying, "That's a good question. Oh, no one's ever asked me that before." I know when I'm doing that I've done my job right.
That's right. So Marcus, give me some questions that you like to ask. Like, what is that question that you ask that people ask, oh, and then people say, oh, I never been asked that question before? What would that be?
You'd be surprised. They're really, more often than not, very simple, because most people are asking questions to extract. I'm trying to ask questions to empower and deliver insight. So, Adi, tell me something. It's a year from now. Everything has gone according to plan. Tell me what's better.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like to ask that question. Yes. Give me another one. What would be another?
Well, off the back of that, so who else would benefit if you manage to create those conditions? Because then I can start eliciting other people in the cast of characters. I don't have to ask. The thing that really gets under my skin is when people use Bant or Medic or Spiced, but they use it as a weapon, not a shield. Bant is a fabulous way of reporting internally, but it's a terrible way of selling, because no one... Bant stands for budget, authority, need, and time. Adi, how much money do you have to give me?
Zero.
Do you have the authority to sign off on this contract?
No, I can see how people would say, no, I'm not going to tell you that, right? They can say 0 and that's it. And then the deal is, there is no continuation.
But if I ask the question differently and I say, okay, so what would be better if you were able to accomplish all of that? Okay, and where would you see the value in that? Who else would be affected? So if I understand it correctly, what you've just told me is you've got 7 people on your business development team. They spend an average of 2.5 to 3 hours a day on dead work. And if we could eliminate all of that, you would recover 21 hours per day, which is 105 hours a week, which is the equivalent of nearly 2.5 full-time employees per year. Would that be fair? Okay. So now
And
I've
then you
got...
write a statement of work based on that. So it's, yeah. So how do you overcome objections? What is your...
It's not
Okay,
my
what do
job
you
to overcome objections. Well, whose objection is it? Mine or the customer's?
do? Which one?
Well, any objection.
What would be the customers?
Exactly. So they're the person best qualified to handle it. So I will ask them questions. So give me any common objection.
You know, that sounds really good what you are showing me, what you're telling me right now, but it's not in my budget right now.
For most people, it never is. I mean, tell me something. If you were able to see the value in this, are you telling me that you couldn't find the budget from anywhere?
Yeah. I see that, you know, you get them into a point where they have to admit like, yes, well, no, or yes.
So I've been coaching someone who's been told by one of their prospects that by the end of August, they need to put the budget in because in September they have to present it to the CFO and that budget will become free in January. Now they have 67 divisions which are failing to sell into a really key market. That on average is costing them north of $500,000 to $5 million per month. And we're asking for 80 grand. So if I can create the conditions where I can speak to someone high up enough, and then they can go to the CFO and say, well, we can give away, I don't know, 2 to 12 million, or we can find 80 grand from somewhere. Now, which one do you want, CFO? And
Right.
then
So you need
create
to be able to
hypothetical...
quantify that, like the return on investments, so then there can be a value. What are
Well,
some of
it's
the
not, sorry to cut across you, but it's not just about money. I believe the most important part of budget is time.
Yeah.
And no one uses time well in the budget conversation. I've developed this model called Crafted. Commitment, resources, access, finances and financials, times and timings, evaluation process and committee, and decision-making process and committee. And most people will confuse interest with intent, intent with commitment, and commitment with readiness. So I'm always looking at the other thing, whereas when the customer takes it into their head, they're normally looking at the thing before. So by asking the question ever so slightly differently and focusing their attention on the right end of the problem, then the objection typically goes away.
Marcus, you definitely know what you're talking about in terms of how to approach sales, how to talk to the buyer, how to present it, how to care about the buyer. People want to hear more, find out more about you and get your help. How can they reach out to you?
Well, we're just changing our domain. So it's probably going to be marcus@principledselling.com. If you can't get me on that, it's marcus@laughs-last.com. So laughs-last.com. And you can get me on LinkedIn. There are 2 Marcus Cauchis. One of them is a much better looking, desperately younger recruiter in Essex. But if you go onto LinkedIn, Marcus Cauchi is the domain, and you'll see a picture of my gold medal winning podcast and my happy smiling bald head, which is glaring back, I noticed. So there's a terrible reflection off the top of my head. And my number is +44 7515 937 221.
Great. So we'll include that in the show notes as well. Marcus, it's been a pleasure having you on this podcast and having this conversation. Always the conversations with you are always lively and intriguing, engaging, and there is always something to talk about. So thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
My pleasure, Adi. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.